You and your dad are both selfish. I wish you had never been born. That's the cruel thing my sister said to my 9-year-old daughter when I left her at my parents' house. Why would she be so cruel to say those words? And what was my parents' reaction afterwards? Let's follow this story together. I'll tell you what happened. Before I delve into the details of the story, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude for taking the time to listen to my story today. Hello everyone. I'm Michael Harrison, 38 years old. Currently, I live with my wife, Lauren, my daughter, Jenna, and my niece, Morgan. Previously, our family consisted of just 3 people. But a year ago, after the court issued a restraining order against Sienna, my sister, we decided to adopt Morgan, Sienna's daughter. You might not believe this, but I'm the one who called the police and CPS. And after their investigation, they banned my sister from having contact with Morgan. To this day, I'm still thinking a lot about that decision. Part of me regrets turning my sister in. The other part thinks I did the right thing by acting like that. The story I'm sharing today took place on a Sunday in August 2024. That day, both Lauren and I were busy. A few days ago, we received the sad news about the passing of David Thompson, a close friend from college. David was only 42 and died suddenly from a heart attack. The funeral was held at 9 a.m. Sunday at St. Mary's Church, about 30 miles from our house. Lauren and I both understood that the gloomy atmosphere of a funeral wasn't appropriate for a 9-year-old like Jenna. We needed someone to take care of our daughter while we attended the funeral and grieved with David's family. 2 days before, I called my parents to ask about helping take care of Jenna, and they agreed to help us. My parents' house was only about 10 miles from ours. This close distance made it convenient for us to have warm dinners together regularly. Every week, at least once, we'd gather at my parents' house, where it was always filled with laughter and the smell of food my mom prepared herself. That Sunday morning at 7 o'clock, we drove Jenna to my parents' house. Right after the first doorbell ring, my parents came out to open the door. My mom, with her characteristic bright smile, hugged her granddaughter tight and said to Jenna lovingly, "My precious granddaughter is here. Today we're going to make chocolate cookies." As soon as she heard Grandma mention making chocolate cookies, Jenna immediately hugged Grandma tight to show her agreement. My dad stood beside them, constantly smiling and saying to us, "You guys don't worry. I'll take good care of Jenna." After Dad's words, I smiled and nodded to thank him. Lauren and I stayed a few more minutes to chat, then we headed off to the funeral. As the car rolled away, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw my parents waving goodbye from the porch. On the way to the church, I still felt lucky to have parents who were always ready to lend a hand. I thought this would be a sad day because of losing a friend, never imagining it would become the start of a nightmare for my daughter. Around 2 in the afternoon, after David's funeral was over, Lauren and I went back to my parents' house to pick up Jenna. When we got to my parents' house, I saw Sienna's silver Camry parked neatly in front of the house. I figured Sienna had brought Morgan to visit my parents as part of her weekly routine. Sienna is 4 years younger than I am. Since we were little, my sister was always more spoiled by our parents, but I never felt shortchanged, because I understood my parents always had certain limits and never played favorites too much. If Sienna got $10 from our parents, then I'd get $9. I just lost out to my sister by a little bit. My sister got married at a relatively young age, 23, to Marcus, a computer engineer. In the early years, their marriage appeared to be happy. Morgan was born when Sienna was 24, and the whole family was thrilled to welcome the first grandchild. However, the marriage wasn't pleasing, so she divorced in 2023. The divorce process was pretty tense and dragged on for almost 8 months. Marcus fought for custody, but in the end, the court awarded custody to Sienna. After the divorce was finalized, she would regularly bring Morgan to visit my parents on Sundays. This both gave Sienna time to rest and gave Morgan a chance to be close with her grandparents. However, in recent months, I noticed Sienna showing signs of psychological instability. She became easily irritable, had sudden mood swings, and overreacted to trivial things. Every time we met at family gatherings, I felt worried about my sister's mental state. After I parked neatly behind Sienna's car, we quickly walked into my parents' house. As soon as she heard the doorbell, my mom opened the door with a smile on her face. After learning we came to pick up Jenna, She quickly turned into the house and called her granddaughter lovingly. "Jenna, your parents are back. Come out here." When Jenna appeared, I immediately noticed something was wrong. My daughter looked sad and clearly afraid. Her usually bright eyes had become gloomy. Jenna wasn't crying, but her attitude was strange enough that I couldn't ignore it. Feeling worried about my daughter's condition, I looked at my mom and asked her with concern, "Mom, did something happen to Jenna? Why does she look so sad?" My mom also seemed worried about her granddaughter. She sighed and explained to me, "At 10 this morning, your father and I went to buy more ingredients for baking. When we came back, we found Jenna sitting silently. We asked, but the little one wouldn't say anything." Hearing my mom's explanation, I felt even more worried. I wondered what had happened to my daughter during the time my parents were away. I looked around searching for Sienna and Morgan, but didn't see them anywhere. Continuing the conversation, my mom, with a puzzled expression, told Lauren and me. After Jenna went silent, Sienna told me that Jenna and Morgan had fought over toys. Maybe that's why the little one is sad. Hearing my mom's explanation, I felt somewhat relieved. Kids fighting over toys is a standard and understandable behavior. But deep down, I still felt something wasn't right about Jenna's attitude. Not wanting to bother my parents anymore, I nodded and replied to my mom politely, "Thank you for helping us take care of Jenna today. We have to go now, we have friends coming over this afternoon." My mom nodded understandingly after those words. She hugged Jenna and kissed her granddaughter's forehead before we left. After saying goodbye to Grandma, Jenna followed us to the car. The little girl strolled without the usual excitement after playing with her grandparents. Sitting in the car, after we drove away from my parents' house, Lauren turned to the back seat and said to Jenna gently, "Jenna, can you tell us what happened today?" After the unexpected question, Jenna hesitated, looking out the window for a long time. The little girl seemed to be considering whether to tell or not. After almost 2 minutes of silence, Jenna finally decided to tell the truth. With a trembling voice, Jenna started telling everything. When my daughter said a short part, I had to pull over to the side of the road to hear my child's story. What Jenna told truly shocked me. During the time I left my daughter at my parents' house, my sister had crossed every line with Jenna. Hearing what my child told me, my head spun with chaotic thoughts. I couldn't believe what I just heard. Sienna, the sister I once loved and protected, had done something unforgivable to my daughter. Lauren sat next to me, her face pale after hearing Jenna's story. She turned to look at me with eyes full of worry and fear. At that moment, I knew for sure I couldn't let this slide. Even though Sienna was my sister, even though this would tear the family apart, I couldn't let what happened just be forgotten. I understood that my next decision could completely change our whole family's life, and potentially alter my parents' relationship and my sister's relationship with my little family. After hearing what my daughter told me, I immediately turned the car around and headed back to my parents' house. Lauren sat next to me, constantly turning to the back seat, encouraging Jenna with a trembling voice. "Don't worry, we'll protect you." After returning to my parents' house, I saw Sienna's Camry still parked in front of the gate. I knew for sure she was still inside. The anger in my heart flared up like flames burning away all reason. Leaving the driver's seat, I walked quickly into the house and pressed the doorbell continuously. After a few rings, my parents opened the door with surprised faces. As soon as she saw me, my mom, with a confused look, asked me, "Michael, why did you come back?" Not answering my mom's question, I just walked straight into the house. Anger had covered all the politeness and respect I had for my parents. At that moment, my sister and Morgan were sitting on the sofa, watching TV, unaware of the storm that was coming. As soon as she saw me appear with anger on my face, Sienna was startled and stammered, Michael, what's wrong?" I couldn't hold back anymore. I yelled at Sienna, "What did you say to my daughter? What did you do to Jenna's doll?" Hearing me yell, my parents quickly ran into the living room. My dad, with a stern face, stood in front of me. He said firmly, "Michael, talk slowly. Don't yell in the house." Right after Dad finished speaking, my mom chimed in with a worried voice. She advised me, "Michael, can you calmly sit down on the sofa? We'll solve this reasonably." At this point, Lauren had entered the house. My wife whispered in my ear, "Michael, listen to your parents, sit down. We have to handle this wisely." After my wife and parents urged me to calm down, I reluctantly sat down on the sofa. However, I still couldn't calm down. Noticing the situation had become less tense, my dad gently asked me, "What's wrong, Michael? Can you tell us calmly?" Trying to stay calm, I replied with a shaky voice. Jenna was threatened by Sienna and told nasty things. Right after I finished speaking, Sienna looked surprised and screamed with a piercing voice. "What? I didn't do anything to Jenna. You're making it up." Faced with my sister's blatant denial, I couldn't control myself anymore and yelled in her face. "You still dare to deny it? You better watch out or I'll beat you up." Sienna couldn't stand it anymore either. Seeing our parents' presence like a protective shield, she yelled back defiantly, "Go ahead and hit me then. I dare you." Right after she finished that sentence, my dad immediately slammed his hand on the table and roared, "Enough! Both of you shut up." Dad's table slam made Morgan and Jenna jump in fear. The two kids quickly huddled close to their mothers, their eyes wide with panic. Realizing he had scared the grandchildren, my dad sighed and looked at my mom with a meaningful look. Just a few seconds later, Mom understood and nodded in agreement. Then, she stood up and walked toward Jenna. My mom sat down next to her granddaughter and hugged the little girl. She whispered to Jenna in the gentlest voice, "Jenna, can you tell Grandma what happened?" Hearing Grandma's words, Jenna silently looked at me, then at Lauren. The little girl's eyes were full of hesitation and fear, as if considering whether to tell or not. Noticing my daughter's worry, I encouraged Jenna warmly. "Jenna, with grandparents protecting you, just tell the whole truth. I promise I'll protect you." At this moment, my dad also spoke up firmly. "That's right, Grandpa promises to protect you. Just tell the whole truth. No one will dare hurt you." With encouragement from the whole family, Jenna was now more confident. My daughter began telling the entire story with a trembling but clear voice. What Jenna told next was like bombs exploding in the small living room space. Every word, every sentence was like a knife stabbing straight into all our hearts. In the living room that day, Jenna began telling everything. When my parents went out to buy more flour for baking, Jenna was treated by Sienna in an unacceptably terrible way. At that time, my daughter was holding the doll I had just bought her a few days before as a reward for good grades. Sienna walked over to Jenna and said, "Can you give that doll to Morgan?" After Sienna's request, Jenna politely replied, "No, this is my favorite doll. If Morgan likes dolls too, I'll give her another doll next Sunday." Hearing Jenna refuse, Sienna got upset. She said to Jenna, "You and your dad are both selfish. I wish you had never been born." When Jenna heard Sienna talk badly about me, my child argued back. Jenna said to Sienna, "You can't talk badly about my dad. Dad isn't selfish. Dad is a good person." When Jenna got to this part, Sienna screamed, "Jenna, what the hell are you saying? She's lying. Don't believe her." Immediately, my mom got angry. She turned to Sienna, pointed straight at Sienna's face and yelled, "Shut your mouth." Then, my mom looked at Jenna and said, "Keep going, Jenna. Grandma is still listening to you." At this point, Jenna began to cry. Jenna told me how, after I defended her, Sienna walked over, grabbed the doll and slammed it hard on the floor. She screamed, "You dare talk back to me? I said your dad is selfish." Seeing the doll get broken, Jenna cried and said to Sienna, "Don't break my doll. That's a gift from Dad." Sienna had lost all reason at that point. She kept slamming the doll on the floor, then stomped on it with her foot. While destroying the doll, she said, "If this is a gift your dad gave you, I have to destroy it." Jenna begged, but Sienna didn't stop. After destroying the doll, Sienna threatened Jenna. She said to my daughter, "If you dare tell anyone what happened, your grandparents will hate you, and I'll hate you too." My daughter was so scared of being hated by her grandparents that she stopped crying and stayed silent until I came to pick her up. Hearing what Jenna told us, my dad sat in silence, like a stone. He looked at Sienna with disbelief. My mom hugged Jenna tight, her eyes red with tears. As for me, I sat quietly watching my parents' reaction. I was waiting to see what they would do in this situation. I wanted to know if they would really protect Jenna or if they would defend Sienna. If they protected Sienna, I swore I wouldn't let it slide, and that would be the last time I'd appear in my parents' house. After Jenna told everything, my parents didn't stay silent. The air in the room became suffocatingly tense as the confrontation began. My dad looked straight at my sister with disappointed eyes and asked, "Why would you be so heartless to say those things to Jenna?" Hearing Dad's question, Sienna immediately jumped up from the sofa. My sister turned to look at Dad with an angry face and screamed, "You believe that kid over your own daughter? Jenna is lying." My mom couldn't control herself anymore either. She stood up and pointed straight at Sienna's face. With a voice trembling with anger, my mom yelled, "You still dare deny it? Jenna told every detail of what you did." Sienna showed no remorse or shame. Instead, my sister continued making excuses with an increasingly harsh voice. "Jenna made it all up. That kid has psychological problems." Hearing my sister accuse my child like that, I couldn't sit still anymore. I stood up, walked towards Sienna and yelled in her face, "You dare say my daughter has psychological problems?" After my angry question, Sienna looked straight into my eyes without any fear and shot back, "That's right. Jenna needs to see a psychiatrist. You should take that kid to a doctor instead of believing her lies." Hearing my sister talk about my daughter like that, my anger erupted like a volcano. I took another step towards Sienna and roared, "You're crazy. You dare hurt my daughter, then blame her." My dad saw the tense situation and quickly stood between Sienna and me. With a stern voice, my dad ordered, "Michael, back off, and Sienna, explain clearly to us." Sienna completely lost her composure at this point. My sister screamed with a piercing voice, "Explain what? Jenna lied from beginning to end. That kid has a mental illness and you don't realize it." My mom couldn't take it anymore. She walked over to Sienna and slapped my sister across the face. With a voice full of pain, my mom said, "You dare call Jenna mentally ill?" The sound of my mom's hand hitting Sienna's cheek rang out in the small room, making the already tense air even more suffocating. Sienna stood there, one hand touching her red cheek, eyes wide with shock. My sister looked at Mom with disbelief, as if she couldn't understand why the woman who gave birth to and raised her could slap her for another child. My dad stood a few steps away, his face stern but not interfering. He stood silently, letting his wife express her emotions as she saw fit. Lauren, next to me, squeezed my hand tighter. She could feel the tension in the air. As for me, I stood there watching everything, my heart pounding in my chest. I saw my mom, the gentlest woman I knew, for the first time in her life get so angry she slapped her own daughter. Morgan cowered on the sofa. The little girl didn't understand why everyone was so angry with her mother. Morgan's little eyes looked back and forth between her mom and the other adults with confusion. But everything didn't stop there. After the slap from my mom, my sister screamed with a voice full of rage. "You believe what a child says without verification, without evidence?" Sienna's question made us all fall silent. The air in the room suddenly became frighteningly quiet. Only the sound of everyone breathing could be heard. Right then, I realized my sister was partly right. Currently, we are only listening to the story Jenna told. All of us believed my daughter was telling the truth. Our hearts could feel the sincerity in every word the little girl said. But for Sienna to not be able to deny it anymore, we really needed concrete evidence. My dad stood there with a troubled expression. He looked back and forth between Jenna and Sienna. My mom also seemed hesitant. Lauren, next to me, gripped my hand tight. She could also feel the deadlock in this family drama. After we all fell silent, Sienna stood there with a defiant look, as if she had found a loophole in our argument. My sister knew that as long as there was no concrete evidence, she could deny all accusations. I felt despair rising. But then, a few seconds later, something miraculous happened. The evidence we needed appeared unexpectedly, and my sister would have to face what she had done without being able to deny it anymore. After my sister demanded evidence, we all fell silent. Suddenly, a clear young voice rang out in that terrifying silence. "I have evidence," my mom lied. Everyone in the room turned to look at Morgan. The one who just spoke was Sienna's daughter. Right after that unexpected declaration, Morgan climbed down from the sofa and walked straight to the front door. The little girl moved with small but determined steps, not looking back. All of us stood up and followed Morgan in confusion. Sienna followed too, her sister's face pale, as if she had guessed something was wrong. In front of the porch, Morgan stopped and turned to look at my dad. The little girl, with a trembling but clear voice, said to him, "Grandpa, follow me." Hearing his granddaughter speak, my dad didn't hesitate and quickly followed Morgan. Morgan led us to the front of the house, where 2 large trash cans were placed. When we arrived, she pointed to one of the 2 trash cans and roared to my dad, "Jenna's doll is in this trash can." Hearing that, my heart almost stopped beating. If Morgan was correct, then this was the concrete evidence we needed to prove Sienna had lied. After Morgan's words, my dad hurriedly opened the trash can lid and began pulling out the garbage. He worked with the urgency of someone searching for truth. I also rushed to help Dad. Together, we dug through the pile of trash with anxious hearts. Every time a trash bag was pulled out, the tension increased. Lauren stood nearby holding Jenna, while my mom stood silently watching. Sienna stood a little farther away, my sister's face getting paler as she watched us dig through the trash. And in almost a minute, Jenna's doll was found in heavily damaged condition, lying at the bottom of the trash can. The doll's head was broken, its hair was messy, and its clothes were torn, exactly as Jenna had described. Seeing the doll in that destroyed state, I felt my heart squeeze tight. This was undeniable proof of what Sienna had done to my daughter. At this point, my dad lifted the doll high so that everyone could see it clearly. He looked straight at Sienna and asked coldly, "Sienna, you still gonna deny it?" Even though the evidence was clear before our eyes, Sienna still wouldn't admit fault. My sister screamed desperately. "Jenna broke it herself, then blamed me. If you want to accuse me, you need camera footage of me destroying that doll." Hearing my sister still deny it so blatantly, we were all shocked. She was still trying to make excuses even when the evidence was clear. But then, Morgan couldn't watch her mother keep lying anymore. The little girl spoke up to Sienna with a voice full of disappointment. "Mom, don't lie anymore. I'm so ashamed. My teacher taught me to admit my mistakes." Hearing her daughter say that, Sienna felt as though she had been struck by lightning. My sister looked at Morgan with disbelief, as if she couldn't understand why her own daughter was opposing her. After that, Morgan turned to my parents and confessed with a trembling voice, "My mom destroyed Jenna's doll, and everything happened just like Jenna told us." At that moment, I felt a complex mix of emotions surging in my heart. What moved me wasn't that Morgan told the truth, but I was touched that the little girl knew right from wrong at almost 10 years old. In that difficult situation, Morgan chose the truth instead of covering for her mother. The little girl decided to do the right thing even though she knew it would get her mother in trouble. At that point, I knew Sienna was completely exposed. My sister had no way to deny or make excuses anymore. The evidence was clear, and even her own daughter had testified against her. At that moment, I felt both relieved that the truth had been revealed and heartbroken that the family had been destroyed. Hearing her own daughter confess the truth, Sienna completely lost control. My sister went crazy and screamed at Morgan, "Why did you betray me?" None of us had time to react when Sienna suddenly lunged toward Morgan in blind rage. My sister was like a cornered wild animal, ready to attack anyone in her way. Immediately, my dad, with the reflexes of a grandfather protecting his granddaughter, quickly stood in front of Morgan. He spread his arms wide, like a steel wall, to block Sienna. Seeing that scene, my heart almost stopped. My sister had completely lost her mind. She was ready to hurt her own daughter just because the little girl told the truth. At this point, I knew I couldn't let the situation escalate further. While everyone was confused by Sienna's violent behavior, I quickly pulled out my phone and dialed 911. When Sienna found out I called the police, she turned to look at me with hateful eyes. My sister screamed, "You dare call the cops on me?" At that moment, I looked straight into Sienna's eyes and replied coldly, "You're not my sister anymore. You're just a child abuser." Lauren stood next to me, holding Jenna tightly, while my mom hugged Morgan, who was trembling with fear. My dad still stood blocking the children like a guard. About 15 minutes later, when the police arrived, our whole family knew life would never be the same again. At that moment, seeing Morgan cowering in my mom's arms and Jenna hugging Lauren tight, I knew I had done the right thing. No matter how heartbroken I was, protecting children was always the top priority. When the police arrived, they took our statements thoroughly and professionally. Noticing the tense situation and signs of violence, they asked my sister to come to the police station for further questioning. Watching Sienna being put in the police car, I felt deep pain in my heart. Even though my sister had done unforgivable things, This scene still hurt me. That evening, we returned to our house in heavy silence. Morgan was temporarily under my parents' guardianship, and the little girl would stay at her grandparents' house until everything was resolved. After learning what my sister had done to Jenna, the court immediately issued a temporary restraining order against Sienna. She wasn't allowed to contact her daughter, and also couldn't go near Jenna. The following week passed in turmoil. During that week, our family faced yet another unexpected change. After a thorough investigation, police and CPS staff shared with us heartbreaking discoveries. They said Sienna was suffering from severe depression after her divorce from Marcus. The pressure of raising a child alone and being refused help from family had caused my sister to lose control of herself completely. She had lived in despair and loneliness for too long. When hearing this information, my mom sobbed uncontrollably. After the divorce, Sienna had asked my parents for financial support several times, but they couldn't help because the amount was too large. My parents felt guilty for not being able to save their daughter when she needed it most. As for me, the investigator revealed that my sister had been angry at me for a long time and decided to take out that anger on Jenna. She saw my daughter as a target for revenge. A few months ago, my sister had asked me to let her stay in my second house for free. I bought that house 3 years ago as an investment. At that time, I refused Sienna's request. I bought that house for almost $900,000, and my sister wanted to live there completely free, so I disagreed. From the time she was refused, my sister remembered that and nurtured hatred in her heart. That's why she took it out on my daughter when she had the chance. When police asked Sienna why she said the cruel words, "I wish you were never born," to Jenna, my sister cried and confessed something heartbreaking. She said that since Jenna was born, I had only focused on taking care of my daughter and no longer cared about my sister. Sienna felt abandoned and jealous of an innocent child. When I heard the police relay these words, I couldn't control my emotions. I turned to my wife and said to her, "She's crazy. She's jealous of a little kid." My wife then gently said to me with a sympathetic voice, "Maybe the divorce left wounds too deep in Sienna's soul." Hearing Lauren speak, I realized that even though my sister had done cruel things, she was also a victim of pain and despair. That didn't justify Sienna's behavior, but it helped me understand the causes that led to this tragedy better. At that moment, I felt regret for not recognizing my sister's dangerous psychological state sooner. 2 weeks later, due to the complex nature of the case, a civil trial was officially held. When the judge read the verdict, everyone in the courtroom silently listened. Jessica was banned from contact with both children for 2 years. However, twice a month, she would be allowed to see Morgan under strict supervision by police or CPS staff, each visit lasting 60 minutes. Hearing this clause, I felt somewhat relieved. At least Morgan still had a chance to maintain contact with her birth mother, even under restricted conditions. The judge continued announcing that Sienna must participate in mandatory psychological therapy and anger management classes. This was a condition for her to regain custody in the future, potentially. The most important part of the verdict was that Morgan was placed in my parents' care. However, they were getting older and raising a 10-year-old child might be too much for them. So before the trial ended, I asked the judge to let me take care of Morgan. After careful consideration of my family situation and financial ability, the court agreed. Hearing the final verdict, my heart felt both relieved and heavy. Relieved because Morgan would live in a safe environment, but heavy because the family was utterly broken. When the trial ended and everyone started leaving the courtroom, Sienna suddenly turned toward me. My sister, with a face full of hatred, cursed me publicly. With everyone watching, Sienna screamed with a voice full of hatred, "Michael, you destroyed my happiness. You took away my daughter." Even though I had mentally prepared for this moment, when it actually happened, I still felt extreme pain. Sienna's lawyer quickly intervened and pulled her out of the courtroom before the situation escalated further. But my sister's curses had burned deep into my mind. At that moment, Lauren squeezed my hand tight and whispered, "You did the right thing. Don't let Sienna's words shake you." I squeezed my wife's hand and nodded in agreement. Leaving the courthouse that day, I carried indescribable, complex feelings. On one hand, I knew I had protected 2 children from danger. On the other hand, I felt guilty for contributing to my sister's dark days. On the way home, I wondered if there was another way to solve the problem without tearing the family apart this much. But then I thought about Jenna and Morgan, two innocent children who needed protection. At that moment, I understood that sometimes doing the right thing doesn't mean doing the easy thing. There are painful but necessary decisions, and calling the police on Sienna was one of them. A year has passed since that family drama. Time might not completely erase wounds, but it has helped us learn to live with what happened. My daughter is now 10 years old, taller and much more mature than a year ago. Jenna is still a cheerful girl, but I see caution in her eyes that wasn't there before. Maybe what happened taught her that not all adults are safe. Morgan is now 11 years old and has become an irreplaceable part of our family. We try to give Morgan as much love as possible, hoping to fill the void that being separated from her birth mother has left behind. My mom and dad regularly visit my house to play with and care for both of my grandchildren. They've become wonderful grandparents, always patient and loving with both Jenna and Morgan. After everything that happened, my parents completely sided with me in the painful decision a year ago. They understood that my calling the police wasn't because I wanted to hurt Sienna, but to protect innocent children. My mom said something to me that I'll never forget. "You did what a father had to do. I'm proud of you." My sister, after a year of participating in psychological therapy and anger management classes, has now changed a lot. Sienna is no longer the out-of-control woman she once was. She has learned to cope with stress and manage emotions positively. 2 months ago, my family had a private meeting with Sienna at a quiet coffee shop. That was the first time after the trial that we sat together as a family, with all members present, from my parents to Morgan. My sister cried a lot during that meeting. She apologized to Jenna for saying cruel words and for destroying the gift her child loved. Sienna also hugged Morgan tight and apologized to her daughter for letting her negative emotions affect her mothering. Watching my sister cry and apologize, I felt my heart being set free. This was the sister I used to love, the kind woman I knew always existed inside Sienna. There's one more year before Sienna will be reconsidered for custody of Morgan. I believe with this positive change, my sister will soon be reunited with her daughter. Morgan is also eagerly waiting for the day she can live with her birth mother again. My family has now truly reconciled. Of course, everything can't be the same as before, but at least we've found family love again. When I tell this story to people I know, some have been frank about their views on my decision a year ago. Some say I did the right thing by prioritizing children's safety over family feelings. They believe protecting Jenna and Morgan was a non-negotiable responsibility. But others say I was too stupid to easily forgive my sister after what she did to my daughter. They think Sienna crossed the red line and didn't deserve forgiveness. Some also criticized me for being too cruel by calling the police and taking my sister to court. They think this was an internal family matter, and I overreacted. What about you? After hearing this whole story, what do you think about my decision? Please leave your comments below this story. And if this story touched your emotions, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other real-life stories. My story ends here. Thank you for following this long story. See you again in future stories. My son pushed me out of my wheelchair in front of 120 people on Veterans Day. 10 years later, he came back looking like something that broke my heart. My shoulder and hip slammed into the grass, pain shooting through my whole body. Derek stood over me, face red with rage, screaming at the crowd that I'd been faking disability for 19 years to collect benefits. My right prosthetic leg popped off when I hit the ground, rolling a few feet away in front of everyone. The Marine cap I'd worn for 2 decades flew off too, lying crooked on the grass. I looked up and saw hundreds of faces staring at me. Some were shocked while others laughed, and many people had their phones out, recording the event. Right then, a little shadow shot through the crowd, running toward me while all the adults just stood there frozen. Before I get into the details of this story, thank you all for choosing to listen to this. And with November behind us, I want to send my gratitude to those who've worn the uniform, those who've sacrificed parts of their bodies, parts of their souls, so that this country could stay free. November 11th isn't just a day off. It's a day to remember. It's a reminder of what freedom really costs. Hello everyone, I'm Robert Thornton, living in Cedar Falls, Iowa. The story I'm about to tell happened on Veterans Day 10 years ago. Now that I'm 64, Looking back on my life, I still remember the moment that changed everything as clear as day. In 1990, I enlisted in the Marines at the age of 19. A small-town kid with empty pockets, no money for college, and believing the military would turn me into a real man. I was right, but the price I'd pay wouldn't be clear for another 15 years. In 2005, during a mission on the outskirts of Fallujah, Iraq, my Humvee hit an IED. I lost both legs below the knee. Coming home to America at 34, sitting in a wheelchair, I had to learn how to live all over again. My wife, Maggie, was a nurse at Sartori Memorial Hospital. She's the one who kept this family together during the darkest years. My son Derek was just 10 when Dad came home. I still remember clear as day that moment when the kid stood at the Des Moines airport, looking at me in that wheelchair. His eyes weren't full of pity. They were confused, like he didn't recognize the man in front of him. The conflict between my son and me didn't start with money. It simmered for nearly 2 decades, through silent dinners, unanswered questions, and looks I chose to ignore. In Derek's head, I was always the failure of a father, the man in a wheelchair who couldn't help the family. That look wasn't something I created. It grew in that kid's mind over 20 years. Perhaps people will wonder why I didn't sit down and talk directly with Derek. But nobody gets it. I tried many times. The problem was that Derek didn't want to listen. And at some point, I realized words didn't work anymore. March 15, 2005, my Humvee hit an IED on the outskirts of Fallujah. I still remember every second of that moment. The deafening blast, the vehicle flipping, and fire erupting from the engine. My legs were pinned under the twisted frame, and I couldn't move. Frank Morrison was lying next to me, blood running down his forehead, but still conscious. I used every ounce of strength to push him out through the shattered window, screaming at him to run before the gas tank exploded. Frank listened, rolled out of the vehicle. Then the second blast went off. When I came to, Frank was dragging me across the sand, both hands gripping the tourniquet around what was left of my legs. He talked nonstop for 25 minutes waiting for the medevac. Wouldn't let me close my eyes. "You die here, your wife's gonna kill me," he kept repeating that over and over. Voice shaking, but hands still holding that tourniquet tight. I owe Frank my life. But surviving was just the beginning. What was more brutal than anything was phantom limb syndrome that nobody could see. My brain kept sending signals to parts of my legs that no longer existed. Every night, I'd wake up feeling like someone was crushing feet I no longer had. Every time I put on the weight-bearing prosthetics, the nerve endings at the stumps would spasm like getting electrocuted. Some days I just wanted to cut more off, cut higher, so nothing would hurt anymore. But the doctors said it was pointless because the pain was in my brain, not in what was left of the limbs. Maggie was the only one who witnessed it all. She'd sit up at 3 a.m. massaging the stumps when I woke up in pain, never a word of complaint. She'd change bandages when wounds reopened, help me up when I fell in the bathroom, and wipe my tears when I couldn't take it anymore. But at the same time, she had to listen to our son asking every day, "Why doesn't Dad try harder? Why does he sit in one spot?" Many times Maggie wanted to tell Derek everything. She'd say to me, voice choking, "Let me explain it to him. He needs to know the truth." But I refused. I'd rather have my son hate me than see his dad as weak. My stubbornness put Maggie in an impossible position. She was trapped between loyalty to her husband and the pain of watching our son grow more distant every day. For 19 years, I stayed silent, thinking I was protecting Derek from the harsh truth. But I didn't realize I was putting Maggie in an impossible spot and letting my son build up a completely wrong story. Until the day when everything could no longer be held together. I still remember that day clear as anything, the day when the conflict between father and son hit its peak. Also, the day I realized a bitter truth. In Derek's eyes, I'd never been the father he acknowledged since his 10th birthday. A month before Veterans Day, Derek showed up at our door at 8 p.m., face tense, holding a stack of papers. I knew something was wrong the moment I saw how he walked into the house without saying a word. Maggie was washing dishes in the kitchen when she heard the door and quickly dried her hands to come out. Derek sat down in the chair across from me and put the stack of papers on the table. Lawyer bills, court papers, debt notices. His divorce from Jessica had wiped out his savings, as well as his monthly child support for Amber. The moment he sat down, Derek looked straight into my eyes and said flat out, "I need to borrow $18,000. I'll pay you back over 3 years." After a long silence, I took a deep breath, tried to keep my voice calm and answered, "I can give you $4,000. You don't need to pay it back." Hearing my answer, Derek frowned. Jaw clenched, voice started rising word by word. "You get disability every month. You don't spend anything. Why only $4,000? I explained that the other $14,000 was our medical emergency fund. Pain medication was becoming increasingly expensive, and Maggie also needed money for her regular checkups. But Derek wouldn't listen. He jumped up, face red, slammed his hand on the table and yelled, "You always have an excuse. It's always health or the wheelchair or the prosthetics. You choose to sit there. I've watched videos of amputees running marathons, climbing mountains, doing everything. And you? You sit in one spot and collect disability." Hearing the yelling from the living room, Maggie rushed out, stood between father and son, her shaking hands grabbing Derek's arm, her voice choking as she begged, "Derek, stop. You don't understand your dad's condition. Everyone's different. You can't compare like that." Derek immediately spun toward Mom, eyes like they wanted to burn everything, voice full of bitterness, dropping each word. "You always take his side. What have you been hiding from me for 19 years? You think I don't know?" Maggie's tears started flowing. She tried to tell him about the nights I woke up in pain, about the syndrome doctors called phantom limb pain, about the times I fell in the bathroom when nobody knew. But faced with Mom's explanations, Derek shook his head dismissively. A bitter laugh escaped his throat. Then he looked straight at Maggie and said, "You say he's in pain? Then why did he promise to carry me everywhere when he came home on leave? Why did he say he'd teach me soccer? Why did he say he'd take me fishing at George Wythe Lake, like when he was little? I waited forever. Then he came home in a wheelchair, and all those promises disappeared. He never explained. He just stayed silent." Hearing those words, my throat closed up. Derek was right. I'd promised so much in those letters I sent home from Iraq. And then I came back, unable to do any of it. I wanted to explain, but I tried to make him understand, and no sound would come out. In that heavy silence, Derek turned around, walked to the door and slammed it behind him. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. Maggie collapsed into the chair, tears streaming endlessly, and I sat there motionless, staring at the space my son had left behind. 2 weeks later, the Facebook posts started appearing. Some people live off the system their whole lives and feel no shame. Then Veterans Day is coming up. Let's see who the real heroes are and who the fake ones are. I read every line, my chest feeling like someone was squeezing it shut. Maggie saw it too. She looked at me with red eyes but didn't say anything. Right when my mood was at its worst, the phone rang. Frank's name appeared on the screen. For years, we'd only called each other on holidays, but this time he was calling earlier than usual. Frank said he wanted to come to Cedar Falls for Veterans Day and wanted to see me again after years of just talking on the phone. I agreed right away, didn't think much about it. I'm just happy I get to see the man who saved my life again. I had no idea that Frank's appearance that day would change everything. November 11th, 10 years ago, but I'll never forget. Ironically, the day I was humiliated in front of the whole town was also the day I was freed from 19 years of silence. The day when the truth finally came out. Veterans Day in Cedar Falls is the biggest event of the year for our town of 8,000. Every year, the whole city pours out onto Main Street to watch the parade, wave flags and honor those who've served our country. That morning, I was wheeled up to the main stage, where Mayor Thompson presented me with a service medal for 15 years in the Marines. The crowd applauded. Maggie stood below, eyes brimming with proud tears. Frank and his wife Caroline had been there since morning, standing in the crowd with a camera to capture the reunion of two old comrades. After the ceremony, approximately 120 people gathered at the Overman Park picnic area, located right next to the Cedar River. The smell of barbecue and the sounds of laughter filled the air. I sat in my wheelchair under the old oak tree, chatting with some neighbors, enjoying the warm atmosphere of the holiday. Right then, a little shadow came running from behind. Amber hugged me tight around the neck, her cheek pressed against mine, voice clear as a bell whispering in my ear. "Grandpa is my hero." I hugged her back, breathing in her sweet hair. In that moment, I thought maybe everything would be okay. Maybe Derek would show up, too, and father and son would have a chance to talk on this special day. But that peaceful moment was shattered just minutes later. Derek appeared from the parking lot, with a stumbling walk and bloodshot eyes. The heavy smell of beer reached me before my son could open his mouth. Jessica quickly pulled Amber away, her eyes full of worry. I took a deep breath and kept my back straight in the wheelchair. Whatever was going to happen, I was still a Marine. I wouldn't bow my head. Standing about 10 feet from me, Derek started yelling, voice echoing through the picnic area. "Look here, Cedar Falls hero. The man in the wheelchair has been collecting disability for 19 years. While his son has to struggle to make a living." The crowd went dead silent. The laughter and talking stopped cold. Every eye turned toward father and son. I felt shame crawling up my spine, but I didn't look down. I stared straight into my son's eyes, waiting. Right then, Bill Patterson stepped out of the crowd. Bill was 68, a Vietnam veteran, and our neighbor for 20 years. He put his hand on Derek's shoulder, voice low but firm. "Derek, this isn't the time or place. Respect this day." Derek jerked Bill's hand away, eyes glaring, voice full of contempt. "You step aside. This is my family business. Nothing to do with you." Bill turned to look at me, his eyes asking if I needed him to intervene. I shook my head slightly, not because I wanted to be humiliated, but because I understood it was time for everything to come to a head. All those years of silence hadn't solved anything. If my son wanted to expose everything in front of the whole town, then let him. I'd survived Fallujah. I'd survived this. Derek continued, voice getting louder. "You all know what? He can walk. He's got prosthetics. But he chooses to sit in that wheelchair to collect extra disability. I've watched my dad act for 19 years. In that moment, Maggie stepped forward, standing between our son and me, voice shaking but trying to stay calm. "Derek, stop. You don't know what you're saying." Hearing Mom speak, Derek spun around, face twisted, screaming right in Maggie's face. "You shut up. You've been his accomplice for 19 years. You hid from me. Too, you lied to me, too." Maggie stepped back, tears flowing. Seeing my wife cry, I wanted to stand up and protect her, but I couldn't. I could only sit there, gripping the wheelchair armrests tight, trying to hold back the rage and shame burning inside. But maybe in over 30 years of being that kid's father, I'd never imagined my son would act like a stranger, just because of $18,000. Just because of the resentment he'd carried for 19 years without ever opening his mouth to ask me one question. That was when everything broke apart, never to be put back together again. In a split second, Derek came forward, grabbed the wheelchair armrests, face leaning down close to mine, heavy breath hitting my nose, then screaming, "Stand up, stand up, show everyone you can stand." Seeing the situation getting tense, Bill stepped forward again, voice like giving an order, "Derek, I'm warning you, let go right now." But my son had lost control. He turned around, used one hand to shove Bill hard, sending him tumbling to the side. The 68-year-old veteran stumbled and fell onto the grass. Then, before anyone could react, Derek put all his strength into pushing my wheelchair with great force. I fell onto the grass, shoulder and hip slamming into the ground. My right prosthetic popped off, rolling away in front of everyone. The Marine cap flew off my head, lying crooked on the green grass. A second of silence. Then whispers broke out. Phones are going up and people are murmuring. I lay there, eyes looking up at the bright blue November sky. It wasn't the physical pain that hurt. It was the feeling of being humiliated by my own blood in front of the people I'd once fought to protect. But I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I was a Marine. I lay there, silent, and felt like my body wasn't mine anymore. But Bill was different from me. Bill struggled to his feet, face red with rage, hands clenched into fists. I knew he was ready to go after Derek any second. But before Bill or anyone else could do anything, a little shadow shot through the crowd, faster than everyone. Amber ran over, knelt next to me, her small hands trying to lift my head, eyes full of tears. Then the little girl looked up at her father, voice clear but full of anger echoing through the picnic area. "You hurt Grandpa. I hate you." Derek stood there, looking at his 7-year-old daughter, who was protecting the grandfather he'd just pushed down. For the first time, The aggressive look on my son's face crumbled. I lay there, 54 years old, being protected by my tiny granddaughter while Bill Patterson was struggling to his feet, ready to charge Derek. But before he could do anything, another voice rang out from behind the crowd. Frank Morrison's voice. Frank stepped out of the crowd, walking with the steady gait of someone who'd once commanded troops in battle. I never thought about this moment when I invited him to Cedar Falls. I just wanted to see an old comrade again, reminisce about our years in Fallujah. But fate had other plans. Frank approached. Unlike the image we had of ourselves when we were young, salt and pepper hair, that long scar on his right arm is still there like a reminder of that fateful day in 2005. He knelt next to me, eyes full of concern, voice still calm. "Bob, you okay?" I nodded, tried to manage a crooked smile. "I'm fine, Gunny, thanks." Derek stood there, looking at Frank, then at me, face full of contempt. Then my son laughed dryly, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Great, now we're doing the whole brotherhood act? You planning to keep performing for the whole town?" The moment he finished speaking, Frank stood up straight and turned to face Derek. He was half a head taller than my son. His voice was low but echoed through the picnic area. "I'm Frank Morrison, the guy who carried your dad out of a burning vehicle 19 years ago in Fallujah, and you just pushed him down in front of me." Derek crossed his arms, still trying to keep that defiant look. "So what? What are you here to do? Defend a disability faker?" Hearing that, Frank didn't answer with words. He pulled his phone from his shirt pocket, opened a video and held it up in front of Derek. The crowd around also looked, waiting in silence. Military dash cam footage from 2005. In it, I was lying on a stretcher, both legs bandaged and soaked with blood, face pale white from blood loss. My voice in the video was weak but clear. "Tell Derek? Tell my son, I love him." Derek watched the video, his face getting paler by the second. But then my son shook his head, voice still trying to stay hard. "Videos can be faked. These days, anyone can edit stuff." Frank smiled grimly, a laugh without any joy. He started rolling up his sleeve, revealing the crisscross scars on his arm, then looked straight into Derek's eyes. "Fake? I've got 14 scars from that day. You want me to take my shirt off for the whole town to see?" Derek was silent for a second. Then my son's voice got quieter, losing that initial aggression. "But he never told me. Not once. If it hurt that much, why didn't he say anything?" Right then, Maggie stepped forward, standing next to Frank. She wasn't crying anymore. Her eyes were red, but her voice was like cold steel, each word sharp. "Did you ever ask?" Derek turned to look at Mom, silent. Maggie took another step forward, pointing at her son. 19 years. Did you ever sit down and ask your dad one question? Ask him how much pain he was in? Ask him what losing his legs felt like? Or did you look at him sitting in that wheelchair and make up stories in your head?" Derek opened his mouth to speak, but Maggie didn't give him the chance. Her voice got louder. "I told you. Right in our own house I explained phantom limb syndrome to you. You didn't believe me. You said I was taking his side. You said I was lying. Do you know I have to massage your dad's stumps at 3 a.m. every night? Do you know your dad wakes up screaming in pain while you're sleeping soundly in your room?" She stopped, took a deep breath, tears flowing again. But her voice didn't shake. "You said I was his accomplice? You're right, I kept the secret because your dad didn't want you to pity him. That was a mistake. But when I tried to tell you the truth, you wouldn't listen. You just wanted to believe the story you made up in your head like some stupid play." Derek looked at Mom for the first time, no longer aggressive. My son's lips moved, voice cracking, "Mom," but Maggie wasn't done. She pointed down at where I was lying, voice choking but still full of anger. Look at your dad. You just pushed down a man who's been in pain every day for nearly 2 decades, in front of your daughter, on a day honoring men like your dad. Are you satisfied?" When she finished, Derek stood there, both hands hanging loose, eyes looking down at me lying on the grass with Amber still kneeling beside me, protecting Grandpa. The wall my son had built for 19 years finally collapsed. Derek couldn't say anything. His mouth opened and then closed, but I wasn't done yet. In the suffocating tension of that winter afternoon, I used the arms that had supported me for 19 years, pushing away all the hands trying to help around me. I braced my hands on the grass, pulled myself up into the wheelchair that had been part of me for nearly 2 decades. Pain from the stumps shot through my whole body, but I gritted my teeth and endured it. In front of the entire town, I wouldn't let anyone see me weak. Once I was steady in the chair, I pushed the wheels myself, rolling straight to where Derek was standing. Stopping in front of my son, I looked straight into his eyes and ordered, my voice a soldier's used to command, "Sit down." Derek collapsed onto the grass like he'd lost all strength. My son's healthy legs folded while I sat in the wheelchair with 2 stumps below my knees. I took a deep breath and then began speaking, not for Derek, but for everyone standing around, everyone who just watched my son push down a veteran on the day meant to honor them. In 1995, your mom found a lump in her chest. The doctor said she needed emergency surgery. Where was the money gonna come from? Where was the insurance? I decided to re-enlist because the military had the best health coverage. Your mom got the surgery and got cured. Did you know that? Derek shook his head, eyes wide. I didn't go into the service because I loved war. I went because I loved you and your mom. Every night in Fallujah, I looked at your picture in my wallet and told myself I had to survive to come home. I paused, looking over at Frank, who was standing nearby. He nodded, eyes red. The day the vehicle exploded, I pushed Frank out first. I knew the gas tank was about to blow. I could have crawled out after him, but I chose to push my teammate out first. If I'd been more selfish, if I'd thought about myself first, maybe my legs would still be whole. But I don't regret it, because that's what soldiers do. Derek hung his head, shoulders shaking. I continued, voice harder. You're 30 years old, 2 healthy legs. You owe money because of your bad decisions, because of a marriage you couldn't keep, not because of war. I refused to lend you $18,000 because that money is our family's medical emergency fund. For your mom, for me, and for you too if you need it. You think I'm stingy? I'm preparing for a future you don't bother thinking about. Amber was still sitting next to me, her little hand gripping Grandpa's tight. Suddenly, my granddaughter looked up at her father with eyes still wet with tears, voice clear as a bell. Dad, every time I sleep over at Grandma and Grandpa's, I hear Grandpa groaning from pain at night. Grandpa hurts a lot, Dad. How come you don't know? The 7-year-old's question rang out through the silent crowd. Derek looked at his daughter, then at me, and then at Maggie, who was standing and crying next to Frank. My son's lips moved, voice breaking into pieces. I didn't know. I looked straight into Derek's eyes, each word clear and slow because you never asked. 19 years, you never once asked me what the pain was like. You just looked at me sitting in this wheelchair and made up stories in your head. Derek cried in front of the whole town. My son cried like that 10-year-old boy who once stood at Des Moines Airport watching Dad come home in a wheelchair. Tears streaming down a face that no longer looked aggressive, just regret and shame left behind. But tears couldn't erase what had happened. The consequences were still coming. After that day, what should have been a celebration honoring soldiers became a memory the whole town didn't want to talk about. But my heart felt lighter than ever. Amber went home with Grandma and Mom, eyes still red but hands still gripping Maggie's tight. Frank said goodbye with a tight hug, then got in the car with Caroline to drive back to Minneapolis. And me, I quietly left Overman Park, left the place where people had honored me just hours before, and went home as a father. But my son wasn't there anymore. What I didn't expect was what happened next. In a town of 8,000 like Cedar Falls, no secret stays hidden for more than 24 hours. Gossip spreads faster than wildfire. From the Main Street coffee shop to the barber shop on First Avenue, from the Methodist church to the Hy-Vee grocery store, the story of the son who pushed down his veteran father on Veterans Day got told and retold, each time adding a new detail. Derek couldn't go anywhere without being stared at. Contemptuous looks followed him from parking lots to convenience stores. Customers started refusing to let him fix plumbing in their homes. We'll call someone else, they said over the phone, their voices ice cold. 3 weeks after November 11th, Derek's company laid him off. The official reason was workforce reduction, but everyone understood the truth. Then Jessica filed a motion in court to modify custody. She argued that a man who could push down his own father in front of his daughter wasn't stable enough to raise a child. The court agreed. Derek was only allowed supervised visits with Amber. During the hearing, Derek didn't argue back once. When the judge asked if he had anything to say, my son just stood there, Head down, voice low and steady. I deserve this ruling. I didn't intervene. I could have testified, could have told the judge Derek wasn't a bad person. Just a son who'd been hurt too long. But I didn't. Because I knew the consequences were a lesson he needed to bear himself. 3 years after that Veterans Day, Derek left Cedar Falls. He moved to Des Moines and found a new job at a company where nobody knew his past. Maggie told me our son had started going to therapy every week. One autumn evening, Maggie handed me an envelope, Derek's handwriting on white paper. I opened it and read just a few short lines. Dad, I'm not writing this to ask for forgiveness. I want you to know I understand now. I need time to become a better person. Your son, Derek. I didn't answer that letter, but I folded it carefully and put it in my nightstand drawer, right next to the photo of 10-year-old Derek standing at the airport the day I came home. In the years that followed, Amber grew up. Every summer vacation, my granddaughter came back to Cedar Falls to stay with Grandma and Grandpa. I taught her to draw and taught her woodworking in the garage, sharing stories about the days in Fallujah with her. Amber turned 10, then 12, then 14. Each year, I saw Derek's features in my granddaughter, but I also noticed something else. The gentleness my son had lost long ago. 7 years after that fateful day, Derek came back to Cedar Falls, face thinner but eyes no longer full of resentment like before. My son stood at the front porch, didn't come in, just waited for me to open the door. When I wheeled out to the porch, Derek looked at me and said, voice low but steady, I'm not here to ask for forgiveness, Dad. I'm here so you can see I've changed. I looked at my son, at the new wrinkles on his forehead, and at his eyes, which had lost some of their anger. I saw the exhaustion of someone who'd been through many sleepless nights, but also saw a calmness Derek had never had before. I nodded slowly, then answered, I can see that, but I'm not ready yet. Derek didn't look disappointed. He just nodded, voice gentle. I understand. I'll wait. Then my son turned around, walked down the steps, got in his car and drove away. I sat there watching until the car disappeared at the end of Farmington Street. 3 more years passed. I was 64, my health was declining, and my phantom limb syndrome was getting worse every day. And I had an important decision to make. 10 years after that fateful day, Amber was 17. My granddaughter wasn't the 7-year-old who used to run through the crowd to protect Grandpa anymore. She'd become a beautiful, intelligent young woman with the warmest heart I'd ever known. Last year, Amber asked her mom to let her move to Cedar Falls to live with her grandparents. Jessica agreed because she understood her daughter needed to be with people who loved her unconditionally. And also because Amber knew her grandparents didn't have much time left. One late autumn afternoon, when Amber was pushing my wheelchair for a walk along the Cedar River, I asked her what she wanted to become. She stopped, looked out at the water shimmering in the sunset, then turned to me, voice gentle but specific. I want to be a doctor for veterans, Grandpa. I want to help people like you not have to suffer alone. Hearing that answer, my eyes stung. I took my granddaughter's hand, and I couldn't say a word. After that day, with my health declining and pain medication doses getting higher, I decided to do something for the granddaughter I loved most. Maggie agreed with all my decisions. She always did, always stood by me no matter what. I didn't have much, just the house on Farmington Street, the little garden out back, an old pickup truck, and what was left of our savings after years of putting money away. I left it all to Amber, because that day when the whole town stood watching, when the adults were still frozen, that 7-year-old was the only one who ran to me. Because every night when I woke up in pain, Amber was the one who brought water to Grandpa, as she deserved a bright future. Jessica had remarried and had a stable life. I didn't want her to worry about Amber when she already had a little one to care for. I wanted to ensure that my granddaughter had everything she needed to pursue her dream of becoming a doctor. Still, our relationship with Jessica stayed good. She still brought the kids to visit Grandma and Grandpa on weekends. A month ago, Derek came to see me again. But this time, my son didn't stand on the porch waiting like before. He walked straight into the house, older, thinner, skin weathered by sun and wind, and limping on a crutch. What broke my heart was seeing my son like that. Derek had lost a leg. The accident happened 2 years ago in Des Moines, when he ran into traffic to save a kid who'd crossed the street without looking. The truck couldn't brake in time and hit my son. He didn't tell anyone, Didn't call his parents. He endured the months after surgery alone, learned to walk again on a prosthetic alone. When I asked why he didn't say anything, Derek just looked down at his stump and answered, voice choking. This is the price I had to pay for what I did to you. Now I understand how you lived for 19 years. I sat there, looking at my son, and couldn't find the words to say. Tears just kept falling. Then Derek told me something I'd never known. For the past 10 years, every November 11th, my son has volunteered at veteran support centers in Des Moines. He helped returning soldiers, listened to their stories, massaged legs for amputees, and read books to those blinded by bombs. Derek did this in silence, without needing anyone to know, hoping that someday he could make up for his mistake with his dad. Maggie stood next to me, listening to Derek's story. Two old parents looking at their son, who'd lost a leg, now sitting in front of us with red eyes. Then we hugged each other, all three of us. Cried as we'd never been allowed to cry before. Amber came home from school and saw Dad sitting in the living room. She froze for a second, then ran over and hugged Derek tight. Father and daughter cried in each other's arms while Maggie and I sat watching, tears still flowing. After that day, Derek moved back to live with us. My son had become a different person. He told me it was too late to start over, too late to make up for the lost years. But for me, it's never too late to love, never too late to forgive. Frank passed away 2 years ago from lung cancer. I didn't get to see him one last time, but Caroline called with the news and said that before he closed his eyes, Frank still mentioned me. Now Caroline's alone in Minneapolis, but she has moved closer to her kids and grandkids so that she won't be lonely. Looking back on my life, I want to tell you all one thing. Never stay silent with the people you love. Don't let pride or fear stop you from telling the truth. And if someone in your family is suffering pain you can't see, ask them about it. A single question can change everything. That's the end of my story. Thank you for listening to the journey of an old soldier, a father, and a grandfather. If the story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe and share it with the people you love. See you in the following stories. And remember, hug the people you love today, because nobody knows what tomorrow brings.